Let's keep reading my commentary. Because the verb justified, which is δικαιοῦται, is parallel to the adjective righteous, δικαίος, right? Notice these two Greek words, δικαιοῦται and δικαίος. They even sound the same first five letters, D-I-K-A-I, and even the sixth letter O. It's because they're rooted in the same Greek words, the same Greek foundational concepts, and that's why the cognates are related to one another. The verbs and the adjectives and the nouns, they all sound similar. Basically, based on this relationship, we could actually paraphrase the verse along these lines, right? This is Paul speaking. Listen to the way I've paraphrased Galatians 3, verse 12. Let me show you the verse in let me see, is it verse 3, verse 12 that I'm quoting? No, it's maybe it's verse 11. I apologize which verse I'm referencing here, but let me just read my own paraphrase here, and you can just listen along. Here's the way I kind of paraphrase it, based on the idea of faith and faithfulness working together the way Paul would see it. I believe this is close to what Paul's trying to explain. This is Galatians 3:11. Clearly, no one is declared as righteous before God by a Jewish-only law commitment, because the scriptures, this is Paul talking, they've already demonstrated in Abraham and continue to teach with Habakkuk that the person who is declared as righteous by God himself will be justified by that person's genuine faith and will live his life according to such faith. You understand how I'm mixing and bringing the two concepts back together, not in a bad way, but the idea of genuine faith as one side of this coin in God's hand, and genuine faithfulness as the other side of this coin in God's hands. Faith and faithfulness are both precious to God. Let me conclude this part of my study tonight with this last paragraph in my own commentary. Alternately, Sha'ul's statement, his quote from Habakkuk, is a theological teaching against any mistaken notions that Torah obedience in and of itself automatically granted covenant status to the individual participant, whether Jewish or Gentile. You understand what I mean by that? In the first century, they were not teaching, those Jewish religious leaders, they weren't really teaching that keeping Torah equals covenant membership or keeping Torah equals salvation. That's not the way they were wielding their understanding of Torah, the way that modern church theologians today describe merit theology and works righteousness. The first century Judaisms didn't have that particular blindness. Remember, from their perspective, grace was meted out to God's people at birth. You were brought into covenant relationship through your identification as an Israelite. In plain language, they were born saved because they were born Israelites. They were born Jewish. That was their theology. We, of course, know that's wrong. You can't be born saved. You can't be born with covenant membership at that level, not on a religious level, not on a spiritual level. Maybe on a natural level, yeah, you could be brought into covenant membership through your heritage and the family you're birthed into. That's no problem with that. But at a spiritual level, there's no automatic salvation granted you just because your parents were Jewish. No. That's the error that Paul was trying to tear apart, disrupt. What Paul is also explaining, though, is there's always going to be these people who think that their righteousness is rooted in what they do. It is just basic merit theology. It's works religion 101. It's because I do, then God saves me. So their works do equal salvation in their mind, and that's the way they conduct their lives. And so for those people, Paul's theology is going to tear that down as well. There is no keep the Torah to become saved in the Bible either, even though that's not the primary argument that Paul's trying to disrupt or to tear down. Nevertheless, that is part of the argument. It's just more of a subtext rather than a primary concept. So that's all I'm trying to say here. In other words, the viewpoint held by historic Christianity and Reformation Paul proponents is not completely off base. You know what I mean when I say Reformation Paul? These people in today's standards who believe that Paul is combating merit theology and works righteousness as grounded in Torah obedience for salvation. These people who teach that that the Jews of Paul's day were somehow believing that their Torah obedience was going to be counted as covenant membership equals salvation. Even though I don't believe that's the way that the Jews in Paul's day were trying to wield their Torah observance, nevertheless, theology is accurate. You can't keep the Torah to become saved, and your works don't equal salvation. So the Reformation message that we hear so often when we're listening to messages by, say, Calvin and Luther and other preachers after him from that Reformation period, you can't work your way into heaven, you can't earn salvation by your works, things like that. The theology is accurate, so don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that's bad theology. I'm only saying that historically that's not what Paul was trying to get at. Let's finish my own commentary here. Between his statement and his proof text, Paul used the conjunction because, the Greek word is hoti, to signal the immediate supporting proof text that would-be covenant members, of course this is read here as the Gentiles, these Gentiles do not walk into Torah submission to gain covenant status. So that's a possible way of interpreting Galatians 3:11, where he talks about, the just shall live by faith, and its context here in Galatians. Although, again, I don't believe that's the primary context. I believe he's, again, working against the whole the misunderstanding of covenantal nomism, and how one's born with Jewish status and how that plays into covenant membership and things like that. Go back and listen to last week's podcast, or go back and watch the last YouTube videos that I uploaded, the last 5, and watch them in conjunction with this particular one, and you'll understand what I'm talking about there. And that'll do it for exploring the Shema, discussions on the issues of Trinity.